Hi, I'm Jyoti Shah, and this is my podcast, Have You Thought About? I'm a writer who loves to find out about what passions people are pursuing, especially if they manage to blend together their skills in unusual ways. In each edition, I'm going to chat with someone I find particularly interesting and who's managed to fit things together in their life or profession that you might not think of as an obvious match. Here, I'm speaking to queer and neurodivergent academic Denis Newman-Griffis, who's studying responsible AI in practice. Now, we met because we're both part of the UK Young Academy. You're on the executive committee, and it's all about creating solutions and working together in an interdisciplinary manner. But what's your journey? How did you get there?
Journey's been interesting. Yeah, so as you can probably tell from my voice, I'm not from the UK originally. So I'm American by background, by extraction, perhaps. I've lived in the UK for a couple of years. So I have had a journey of really bouncing around a lot of different kinds of disciplines, a lot of different kinds of ways of working, a lot of different places and environments of working. And I don't know if bouncing around may not be the right way to describe that, but certainly it's been a continuous evolution throughout. I've always been really interested in trying to make a difference in the world, do something that challenges how people work with each other, trying to take things that are posing challenges and posing transformations to the world, make them a little bit more positive in some kind of way. And so that's what brought me initially back into academia. So after I did my undergrad, I sort of went and did software development for a while and decided that it wasn't really the right fit for me. So I went back, graduate school to pursue a PhD. I started out working in computer science, looking at the ways of building computer technologies, building artificial intelligence systems in particular, to work with the rich kinds of information that we as people exchange and share with each other all the time, but often get lost in data-driven systems, get lost in how we work with people and information in practice. And I ended up encountering a lot of, this often happens with good career trajectories, encountered just unexpected opportunities, unexpected directions that have really changed the course of what I do significantly. So initially I was a PhD student looking for a project and ended up getting connected with a group at the National Institutes of Health in the US that was looking at better data-driven ways, data-informed ways of, informing US disability benefits processes. So trying to bring better data and information that's more representative of people's experiences into this process of assessing for disability benefits. And, this for me was something that was quite unexpected, but a really powerful opportunity of here's something where these are processes, these are systems that many people come into contact with that make a really big difference and that also have a strong history of failing people in a lot of ways. And this is a space where the work that I do, the computational work of being able to collect and access information, can help alleviate some of that. And so that sort of took me into this different journey of looking at data and artificial intelligence related to disability. That has taken me then from building technologies to a little bit more of understanding the systems that we build around technologies. When we say, here's an AI system that helps you analyze information about disability, well, what do we mean by that? Where are we getting that information? Is it capturing the things that we want to capture? And starting now I've moved even a bit further in that space to thinking about the broader kinds of practices of how we work with data technologies in general. Being able to say, if these are the things that we want to accomplish, if this is the change that we want to see in the world, if this is the way that we want to connect people with information and make better and more informed decisions, how are we actually reflecting that in the practices of how we design and develop and evaluate technologies? And what does that mean for their impact in terms of equity and also in terms of effectiveness? So it's been quite a bit of a journey through a lot of different disciplinary perspectives, but really still just trying to dig deeper. And I think it's always been trying to dig deeper onto this question of how do we connect the technological innovations that we're trying to pursue in research and development to making a tangible difference in areas that are important to people and that are challenging parts of people's lives.
So clearly it's, AI, those tools, you're passionate about that, But from what you're saying, it's not just the technology, but the human driving it all. I think often people don't think about that. Often we have conversations about AI, well, not you, in general terms, and it's like, it's taking over the world. But it's a lot more nuanced. And from what you're saying, the human is really, really key when you're thinking about solutions, when you're thinking about driving society forward.
Yeah, so it is a really key for me component of this picture of what ethical use of AI, what responsible use of AI, and just what impact of AI on the world looks like. It often falls out of the conversations about what that looks like, and we sort of default to building better technologies and better models. But and I will say better technologies and better models are very important, and I don't want to try to throw that in the bin by any means. But when we're working with these kinds of systems, when we're working with AI systems, what we're working with is not just a piece of technology. It's the data that we feed into that technology and where that data came from. So, what are the processes that we use? What are the perspectives that we draw on to decide what about the world we want to measure, how we want to turn it into data, how we want to say, this is an aspect of yourself that I think is important, that I want to represent in my information system. So I'm going to turn you into numbers. Well, how am I going to turn you into numbers? I have to make specific decisions about what pieces of you, what pieces of your experience are important. Those decisions, long before I get to any technology implementation, those decisions determine so much about what I can represent about you, what I can represent about the world. So I can give you an example in the disability space where I've done most of my work. We think about evidence that's related to trying to say, is somebody disabled? Well, if you define disability in terms of what's called the social model of disability, so this is 30 or 40 years old way of thinking about disability is kind of emerging from how a person interacts with the world and whether a person's needs are met by the world that's around them, then what you would need to be able to say, is this person disabled? What does disability look like with this person? What you need is information about the person, their needs, the environment that they're in. Now, if I instead define that in a way as it often is in kinds of medical practice, and there's a long history of harmful practice and policy around this, thinking about disability in a very medicalized way, then perhaps what I would try to capture in data, what I would try to use as my information that counts, is only something like a medical diagnosis. If I'm defining disability in that way, if I'm defining this thing that I'm interested in these two different ways, then I end up using wildly different kinds of data that are going to tell me different kinds of things about the person and about the world, regardless of what technology system I plug them into. So you have to think about those kinds of human decisions and human aspects of like, what is it that we're deciding is important? How do we want to agree on defining the things that we're interested in and measuring them and deciding what we can observe and what we can't? That's on the input side. Then also, when you think about, you plug something into an AI system, it tells you, okay, there's, this radiology image indicates a cancerous lesion. Well, what do you do with that? We have to think about not just what does the AI system produce, but then what do our human systems do with what comes out of the AI? If we say this system predicts, for example, risk of recidivism really, really well. If we say that, there's a lot of work that's been done in this space, trying to build predictive models for recidivism risk in criminal justice settings. If we say, well, our system predicts recidivism, so what we're going to do is we're just going to take that and act on it and say, you're a high risk, we're not going to grant you parole. That's a very different kind of outcome than if we say, well, our system is one tool that can help give us one part of the picture of thinking if you might be at risk of recidivism. So we're going to take that as one piece of information and integrate it in with many other things that we know, many other ways of looking at you and your behavior and the world that you operate in, and say this is one part of a much larger process. Same technology, same output from it, different ways of interacting with that and defining what we do with it, and you end up with very different kinds of outcomes from the overall process.
There's clearly a lot more nuance to the work that you're doing, to the practical applications of the AI tool set than often is reported, actually. And factoring that in, even the way that you're talking now, a lot of it is about connections. Now, you're clearly a connector. So as well as within the academic space, how do you bring all of that natural ability, or maybe you trained yourself to connect into all areas of your life?
It's definitely a skill that takes a lot of practice, that has taken a lot of practice and continues to take a lot of practice. But I think connecting people, connecting perspectives and ideas it's tremendously exciting to me to be able to say, here are people with shared perspectives or different perspectives about the same issue. Let's come together and let's talk about this. Let's try to come to a shared understanding. What drives me is that bringing people together, coming to that shared understanding, coming to that shared language is how change happens. You cannot change something working as one individual, but if you become one individual who talks to 100, and those people each talk to 100, suddenly you have something that's really going. You have, your individual action turns into a movement. Connection has become a core part of my professional work. Certainly for the work that I do in the responsible AI space, and I'm working on a couple of research projects right now that are all about connecting people across sectors and across areas, looking at when we talk to people working in the public sector, when we talk to people working in private sector or civil society or research funding, what have you, thinking about what does working with AI technologies mean to you? How do we come to shared understanding of what it means, first of all, and then how we actually work with it? That, for me, is where the difference happens, when we can start to say, well, this is not just, I'm going to sit over here as a technical person, you're going to sit over there as a policy person, and we're just going to kind of throw words at each other. But to be able to bring people together and say, we want to understand, what does working together as people with technology as part of that process look like? That's where change happens. Those acts of connection, that process of connection, it's very core to what I do professionally. It's also something that I really love to try to bring in and value bringing into other areas of my life. Certainly working with the UK Young Academy, that is something that is very important to me. And really a lot of the drive for me is an opportunity to connect people and to bring together exciting people in the UK with ideas and with energy and with passion, and connect them to each other and connect them to us, to resources that can help turn that into action. That becomes then something that's very powerful in a way to help change something in the world around us. And yeah, it's just, I find connecting people and seeing what happens when you bring together different ideas and different perspectives to be one of the most fascinating things we can do in life.
But were you always this sociable? Or is this something that you learnt in the sciencey bit, and then went, oh, hold on a minute, this is actually quite helpful in not real life, but in the people bit. Like, I have challenges with the people bit personally. It took me a while to be like, oh, I've actually got to talk to people in order to be able, I can't just sit with my little book in the corner, which I spent a long time doing as a kid. I'm not saying you necessarily did, but what came first, or did it develop together that as you were getting deeper into, the thinking spaces and the changing spaces, and then also having to deal with people? People are not predictable.
People are definitely not predictable. It is something that I certainly struggled with as a kid. It's something I still struggle with today. One of the things I think is really important to bring out and to amplify is, like, as I said at the beginning, I am part of my identity is that I'm a neurodivergent academic. I have ADHD. I experience challenges of being overstimulated when I'm interacting with a lot of people, having hard times following conversations sometimes, etc. I've developed skills through a lot of practice of how to work with that, how to understand what my limitations are, work with that in a constructive way, and not just as I used to do in a sort of destructive, just continue pushing harder and harder until it doesn't work anymore kind of way. But so my parents were both ministers. So I grew up in an environment of bringing people together, of watching the figures around me, speaking and conveying and sharing thoughts and sharing homilies, but sharing ideas and sharing discussion and trying to make spaces for people to come together and connect. And so I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot about why it matters to bring people together, what it looks like to do it in a constructive and a safe way. I've done music all of my life. I started out playing in bands in school and spent many years singing in large choirs. And that kind of the experience of making art, of making music with other people, feeling what happens when your voice is one of 100 or one of 150, like making something so powerful and so magical together that each individual person can't do. That in and of itself builds that value and it builds those skills. And I think really some of the most valuable training that I've had working as an academic has not been in academia, but has been in doing performing arts, being in theater, being in music, learning how to stand up in front of people and get past or set aside whatever it is that I'm dealing with in the challenges of how do I speak to you? How do I interact with you? How do I perform the roles that I need to do by saying, well, this is a performance. I'm going to perform the role because I know what it is. And that becomes a very, very powerful tool for not just faking interaction with people and getting something that works, but actually it is a tool for making genuine interaction happen. When I approach talking to people through a role, what happens is I talk to people, and what happens is there's a conversation, there's a connection that happens there that's facilitated by approaching it through a role, approaching it as a performance, but it's in no way constrained by it.
But factoring that in, and it's interesting you say that because it's actually reminding me of not so much the music bit, but of when I was a kid, I fell in love with Irving Goffman and impression management and the idea of that you have certain ways of operating in certain situations, which I think is brilliant for the social media sphere, for the digital sphere personally. And this was pre then. And so that helped me. But with what you're saying, music isn't just a way, or performance even, isn't just a way of operating. For many people, music is very much part of exactly who they are. And you mentioned earlier about, overstimulation, etc. How has music helped you completely navigate life, bearing in mind how multifaceted you are as an individual and the various journeys that you've gone through in order to just keep going? You've moved countries, you've changed, you've gone through multiple disciplines, you're having to take on additional ways of operating because of the neurodivergence, like trying to figure it out in a neurotropical world. But with music, how has it helped you beyond?
Music surrounds me and fills me at pretty much all times. I mean, it is how I think, it informs how I experience, how I feel things in the world. If I ever want to write anything, the way that I get that done is I put on one of about 15 different kinds of, music that are good for writing. And suddenly it lets me focus and it lets me give space to engage with my thoughts and engage with ideas. And, music feeds my soul and it builds fulfillment where not just where I'm not feeling fulfillment from other things, which certainly does happen sometimes. That's just part of life. You do things that aren't fulfilling, but it also, by unlocking that more, the humanist side, the humanist parts of me that I spent a long time kind of pretending weren't there because I was thinking, oh, I have to be, I'm a scientist. I can't have these humanities parts to me, which is completely wrong, completely false, and very wildly counterproductive. Just like unlocking this, it's saying this is a lens through which to experience the world. This is a lens through which to experience thinking and ideas and engaging. When I'm listening to music is more, I have greater access to emotions. I have much greater facility of being able to move between ideas. It quiets things for me. Music becomes the kind of cloth that I move on to move through life. I've got music going in my head. I've got, music going in my earphones. It's what helps bring out the joy and bring out the value and bring out the experience and connect with, ways to connect with other people. Talk to people about music. That's a great way to connect with people. And it really helps me access the joy and creativity that can often be difficult to find.
And that was queer and neurodivergent academic Denis Newman-Griffis, who studies responsible AI in practice. Do you have an interdisciplinary life? Because I would love to hear from you, and perhaps we can chat on this podcast that goes with my newsletter, which is also called Have You Thought About, and can be found via www.drutisshah.com. Please join me next time for an interesting conversation with another guest who likes to mix up lots of things in their life. Do listen to past episodes and rate and review the podcast if you've enjoyed it. Thank you to Rian Shah for the music.